peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
A very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for joining us. This is Diaspora Dispatches. We get to bring you the latest news from the continent of Africa, and today being a Monday, I have so much to catch you up with. My name is Miriam Ogutu. Good morning, good evening, depending on where you're tuned in today. So without wasting any more of your time, let's get into it, and we start with Nigeria. And striking doctors in Nigeria's public hospitals have suspended their 2-month-long industrial action. The strike by resident doctors who are training to be specialists had almost crippled the country's health sector. The medics union said it is giving the government another chance to meet its demand. They withdrew their services over complaints about poor pay and allowances, as well as a lack of insurance cover. For many Nigerians, the announcement of the suspension of the doctors' strike will come as a big relief, but people may have to wait a few more days. The National Association of Resident Doctors said its members will all be back on duty by Wednesday. This would allow those who have traveled away from their place of work to return. And then we head over to Somalia, and Somalia's Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble has described the deportation of Somalis from the self-declared Republic of Somaliland as unfortunate. The authorities in Somaliland deported hundreds of people who are from southern Somalia on Sunday. They were arrested in Las Anod town, with the authorities citing rising insecurity. Prime Minister Roble identified those who had been deported as Somali businessmen, elderly people, women and children. Those who had been deported were being looked after in Puntland, its Interior Minister Abdirahman Dabakad have said. And then we head over to Ethiopia, and an Ethiopian rebel group has kidnapped at least 145 civilians in the western Benishangul Gumuz region following a heavy fighting with security forces that displaced thousands of people. The state-appointed Ethiopian Human Rights Commission said a group calling itself the Gumuz People's Democratic Movement abducted the civilians in Sedel, Woreda, following the clashes. A fighting has been raging between local security forces and the rebels since Sunday. The displaced people will face dire humanitarian challenges unless they are assisted, the Commission and local media outlet, the reporter wrote. Benishangul Gumuz region hosts the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam and has been blighted by armed attacks in recent years. And then still staying with Ethiopia, and Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has just been sworn in. The ceremony in Parliament comes after his party won a landslide victory in June's election. The vote, which was boycotted by some parties, took place to the background of a conflict in the north. Mr. Abiy was first appointed Prime Minister in 2018 by the then governing EPRDF coalition following anti-government protests. He then went on to form the Prosperity Party in 2019, which included most of the coalition's parties, but significantly not the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front. The civil war is now between federal forces and the TPLF. And then we head over to Algeria, where the country has banned French military planes from flying over its territory. The French army has said as the diplomatic row between the two countries intensifies. The move comes a day after Algeria recalled its ambassador from Paris, accusing France of unacceptable interference in its affairs. Algeria said it was responding to comments attributed to President Emmanuel Macron by a French newspaper. He was quoted as saying the former French colony was ruled by a political military system with an official history that was based not on truth but on hatred of France. Last week, France cut the number of visas it issues for citizens of Algeria and other North African countries. And then we go to South Sudan, where about 500,000 people have been affected by flash floods in South Sudan. The UN now has confirmed nearly half the country in the nearly half the counties in the country were underwater, with torrential rains causing rivers to burst their banks, it added. President Salva Kiir said his property in his home village was submerged and that it was time for South Sudanese to work together to solve the humanitarian crisis instead of fighting. The United Nations says tens of thousands of people have been displaced by the floods, their homes, livestock and crops destroyed. And then we head over to Tunisia, where more than 500,000 demonstrators held a show of support on Sunday throughout Tunisia for President Kais Saied, whose power grab has stirred controversy in the birthplace of the Arab Spring. With an estimated 3,000 of them rallying in the capital Tunis, the pro-Saied crowd exceeded that which gathered a week earlier to oppose him. On July 25th, after a month of political stalemate, Saied sacked the Prime Minister, suspended Parliament and granted himself judicial powers, a move he followed up by measures that effectively allowed the President to rule by decree. And then head over to Chad, where now a peaceful demonstration in Chad's capital, a city, was also dispersed by police on Saturday, leading to dozens of protesters being injured. 15 minutes after the beginning of the march, a video showed panicking crowds running from the scene as police began to use tear gas grenades against the protesters. The demonstration on Saturday morning drew a crowd of hundreds carrying placards and Chad's national flag to demand that the Military Transitional Council, currently governing the country, organize elections and put control back into the hands of elected civilians. The demonstration, the latest anti-government action that has turned violent since a new military government took power earlier this year, the first change in leadership in the Central African nation in more than 3 decades. And then we go back to South Sudan, and a government delegation in Khartoum has started negotiations with the Kit Gwang faction of SPLM-IO. The talks, which is being mediated by the Sudanese government, is aimed at fully implementing the 2018 revitalized peace agreement. Last month, the Kitwangang groups expressed its willingness to negotiate with the SPLM under President Salva Kiir to expedite the full implementation of the deal. The Splinter group in the Sudanese capital is headed by General Simon Gatwech-Dual, the former SPLM-IO Chief of General Staff, together and General Johnson Olonyi of the Agwelek forces. The government delegation is led by the chairperson of the National Transitional Committee, Tut Gatluak, who is also the presidential advisor on security matters. Other members include the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mayek Ayiding, and the Minister of Investment, Dr. Thieu Mathok, among others. And then we still staying with one of the Sudans, this time Sudan, and the United States of America has warned Sudan against disrupting the transitional system. Washington has threatened to stop bilateral aid, including military and security cooperation between the U.S. and Sudan. In a statement on Saturday, the United States Department of State said the Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa, Jeffrey Feltman, held talks in Khartoum during his 3-day visit to highlight the United States' unwavering commitment to Sudan's continued political transition. During his meetings with Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok and the members of the Cabinet Sovereign Council Chairman Abdul Fattah al-Burhan and members of the Sovereign Council and other political stakeholders, Mr. Feltman expressed the United States' dedication to continued political and economic support as Sudan's transitional process. And then we head over to South Africa, where now Zulu King Mrs. Zulu Kazwelethini is facing allegations of siring 2 children from incestuous relationships in what could spoil the reputation of his royal household. In damning allegations that emerged on Saturday, the king is said to have sired 2 children with one of his late mother's domestic helpers and who was also a relative. All these claims are contained in a report published by one of South Africa's biggest Sunday papers, City Press. Dating or even marrying a cousin is not illegal under South African law, but it is customary taboo among many ethnic communities, including Zulu, who also consider it very immoral. The allegations, however, and curiously, come at a time when a faction of the royal house is objecting to his ascendancy to the throne. King Mrs. Zulu rose to the head of the Zulu monarchy following the death of his father, Goodwill Zwelithini, who died in March 2021. But he has been portrayed as unfit for the throne. A City Press quotes a source saying Mrs. Zulu has been sexually involved with 2 of his close cousins who bore him 2 children. And this isn't a secret, as in everybody knows there in Zululand. All right, and then we end our bulletin this afternoon from Cameroon and in Anglophone region particularly, and the Prime Minister and Head of Government, John Dion Gov't, will be in Bamenda this week for a mission to discuss and consolidate peace. The Prime Minister is expected to start his working visit to the Northwest region on Tuesday, October 5th, when he arrives in Bamenda. The second day of his visit will be marked by a public meeting at the ceremony ground at Commercial Avenue before a working session with stakeholders from Boyo Division and follow-up of the recommendations of the major national dialogue. The visit to the Northwest region came 2 weeks after he carried out the same mission to the Southwest region, where he came back with proposals from various delegations. And that is the latest from the continent this afternoon. But I want us to stay on this a news item from Cameroon before we move on and look at what's happening in Chad. And now we know that there was a national, I think, what did President Paul Biya call it? A national dialogue that happened in 2019. Was it around September, or end of September, I believe? And this national dialogue was supposed to bring fractions, government representatives and a section of Anglophone leaders who were supposed to be, they were trying to find a solution, have a dialogue, that will help solve the problem that we see, the crisis between the government of President Paul Biya and the Anglophones. Cameroon was colonized by two entities, and the major part of the Cameroon, they are Francophones, and a smaller part of that are Anglophones. So that is how it has been since, the country was in existence. And then, about from 2017, President Paul Biya decided that to make an announcement that now they're trying to have the country, all of the country, regardless of which part, and trying to make French be the language, the national language, basically. So any official, event or official anything, even or session, even if it's you're having a session in court or teaching in schools, this was supposed to be done in French. And the teachers and lawyers from the Anglophone region are the ones who started protesting in 2017. This is, from a backdrop of years of not a very good relationship between that part of Anglophone and, the rest of Cameroon. And as well, there have been complaining, I think, similar complaints that we see from, even Biafrans and other groups that are now wanting to secede across Africa. One of the key, problems they've heard, the Anglophones, they've been saying they have been marginalized in their own country, and they have been treated like second-class citizens in their own country, and they're being forced now to speak French, which they do not speak. They are from the Anglophone part. And so the teachers and lawyers refused. You can't have us teach in a language you don't understand, and you can't have us teach in a language the children don't understand. So what we are doing here does not make sense to us. We operate in English, that is our official language, and so they started to protest. And after that, I think they were met with a lot of force, and that made things escalate from 2017. And I think it's just a couple of days ago, I was telling you, I think at the beginning of September, that schools had started reopening in the Anglophone region. Since 2017, there has been an heightened insecurity around that region that has made schools closed, that have made people move from their homes into the forest, and some villages are desolate right now. And so much has been taking place that really are tantamount to human rights violations and abuses. And there have been reports after reports that has been showing that the Cameroonian army and President Paul Biya have been part of the people that have been perpetrating even cases of violence, against the people in the Anglophone, but also more so rapes and torture and things like that. And we've seen report after report. And the latest one, even the government of Cameroon itself acknowledged that indeed our armed forces were involved in the rapings and other inhumane, reports that have come from the Anglophone region. All right, so now that aside, so this the national dialogue that took place in 2019, the end of September 2019. I think it's now about 2 years. And so when this national dialogue was supposed to take place, a few weeks before that, the leaders of Anglophone region had been given a life sentence, and the court proceedings took place in a martial court. Forget the fact that they're civilians. I don't know how you go try a civilian in a military court, but that is what happened. And also the timing when that ruling was made, in the wee hours of the morning, I think around 3 or 4 or thereabouts. So it was very unusual. So the government, after these leaders of Anglophone were given a life sentence, I think about 9 or 10 of them, and the government decides now it's about time to start a national dialogue so that the government can hear the grievances of the people of Anglophone. And I was just, even that time, I wondered, you want to talk with the people of Anglophone, but at the same time, their leaders, who would better articulate the problems of the Anglophones? You've already taken them to jail and you have slapped them with a life sentence. So that I could not understand. But nevertheless, they're still there. I think they've made appeal after appeal, and nothing has been forthcoming. So now the Prime Minister is, and by the way, that national dialogue was just between the President Paul Biya and his government, because really there was no proper representation of the people that were supposed to be on that dialogue table, the people who could speak on what the problem is or what they feel the problem is. And as well as the president, or the government rather, already came with its raft of issues if the government felt was going to be discussed. And of course, they came with preconditions. They said secession was not going to be discussed, and I think other issues. So that was not open for discussion. So I think it was about 8 points. I can't remember now. It's 2019. And so the national dialogue happened. And that was that. We've not seen any implementation. We've not known how the country has moved forward in terms of following up, some of those things that, the government had put across as the issues they felt were plaguing or, inciting the conflict between the government and the people of Anglophone. They did not hear what the people of Anglophone were lamenting about, or some of the things, the pressing issues, or why they even want to leave Cameroon and form their own country. And they have a name for it. They call it Ambazonia, right? And so that did not go anywhere, because if you come to a dialogue and you already have preconditions, and you're essentially not going to hear what I have to say, you just want to say what you want to say, and whatever you want to say, that is what you want us to discuss. But on the other hand, you're calling it a dialogue, but you'll not hear what I have to say. Then we're not solving any problem. If it's a dialogue, then it has to be a proper dialogue that has proper structures where everybody must be heard. Otherwise, don't have it at all. So that dialogue was really bogus and bore nothing at all. So now 2 years later, and Prime Minister Joseph Dion Gov't is back. He's been making a lot of visits to that part of Cameroon, to the Anglophone region, and the latest. So he's saying that he wants to follow up on some of the recommendations from the major national dialogue. How are you going to follow up on something that was not really meant to bring any solution? So of course, one of the key things that was discussed that I can remember from that national dialogue was to try and make the Cameroon a bilingual country, and especially perhaps the people of Anglophone, they could have a choice. You could speak in English or speak in France, and maybe the other part of Cameroon that is Francophone could now maybe start operating in both French and in English. But don't be fooled. The issues around the conflict between the government of Cameroon and the Anglophones are way beyond just a language problem. It goes beyond years of marginalization, as I have told you, and a systematic marginalization for that reason. And so since 2017, where the new conflict arose, schools have been closed. So these kids have not been going to school. But as I said there earlier, in September early, schools started being reopened, and hopefully they'll rebuild some of those schools that were burnt down, some of those schools that are in really bad condition, and hopefully the kids from that area can start going back to school. Can you imagine 10, 15 years or 20 years later, but now you have to compete with the rest of the children from the other part of the world that have been continuing, or that part of Cameroon that have been continuing with education and have been continuing to pursue what, their dreams and all that. And you have to compete with these kids at, looking for same opportunities. Of course, the kids from Anglophone will be disadvantaged. And of course, it's every child's right to get the basics, and education is just one of them. So with the Prime Minister John Gov't now in that region trying to implement, recommendations or follow-up recommendations of the major national dialogue. I think I'll be following this. The visit is expected from this week, and the main reason is to he'll be on a mission to consolidate peace. You can't consolidate peace when the foundations of that peace are just faulty. It cannot hold. The foundations and the intentions must be right. Otherwise, we'll have a situation like what you're seeing in South Sudan, where the foundations of the talks was just upside down. And so it was faulty from the get-go. And that's why you see the country is still in chaos the way it is. Whatever it is, and the revitalized peace agreement and other things were never really based on finding a solution that will create a stable and a peaceful South Sudan, especially for the people of South Sudan. It was centered around, power and things like that, things that really don't matter to a normal South Sudanese. And so we have seen what has happened in South Sudan. So even in this, Prime Minister Paul Gov't is saying that they're going to discuss and consolidate peace. So you can't consolidate peace when the foundations of that peace is weak and faulty, as we have seen, because the government of Paul Biya has expressed and demonstrated it's not willing to really find a solution. And of course, whatever the Anglophones are crying and seeking for, that is a referendum to have them leave, that is something that will not happen in his lifetime. And may I remind you that Paul Biya is the second longest serving president in the continent. I think this year he is, is it 40 years or 41, thereabout, and he's the second longest serving. The first one, of course, is the president of Equatorial Guinea. Yes, that one that has his son as his vice president. And so he's been there for quite a while, and he has no plans of leaving that presidency. Very well. So there has been some recent developments from Chad. And over the weekend, we know President of Chad, Idris Deby, died earlier in the year after he won an election, and a day before he was sworn in, he went to accompany, or he went to be with his soldiers who were at the front line fighting the insurgency that has plagued the Sahel region, and he was shot. How he was shot is still a mystery. And then immediately his son was bestowed, who was also a military person, was bestowed as the country's, a president. Very interestingly, as I've always reminded you on the show, in Africa, if you're a country that is being led by a military, or in the fashion in which Idris's son now is the president, the way he came to power, then automatically you are disqualified from being a member of the African Union. But for some very interesting reasons and very open, I don't know what to call it, but he is the president. And Chad was not removed from African Union. If that had happened in any other country, I promise you, they would have been removed from being a member of the African Union. And we saw France has been very supportive of that. But President Macron did not criticize why Idris's son became the president. But when Mali had had a coup, and a military person came to power, Chad was not, France was not very happy. So it's just a double standard there being played when it comes to some of the issues and how the international community decides to come in. And if at all, if they feel that their interest is being taken care of, then they will turn the other side. And so we saw a demonstration take place over the weekend that the people in Chad are saying enough is enough. We want a transition. We want to hold an election because we want to elect our own leader. Because Idris Deby had been a president for like 30 years or so. He died, and then the son now, so it's like it's a monarch there in Chad, and that is against the constitution, because if they were following the constitution, the Speaker of Parliament was supposed to take over as a transitional president until the elections were held. Initially, it was supposed to be I don't know if they have a vice president, but they had the prime ministership, a prime minister post, which Idris Deby, I think, got rid of was it in 2018? So that position was vacant. All right, so the Speaker of the National Assembly was supposed to take over interim before the country goes into an election, but that was not to be. So the president's son became the president. That went completely against the constitution, but France came and applauded it and was very happy supporting the transition there in Chad. And now Chadians are saying enough with that. And so on Saturday, there were demonstrations that drew a huge crowd carrying placards and Chad's national flag to demand that the Military Transitional Council, currently governing the country, organize elections and put control back into the hands of elected civilians. Okay, so I'll be following this story very keenly. I think, parts West Africa and a bit of Central Africa, there seems to be a lot of turmoil going, up on there. So these are stories that we shall be following for you, and I'll be bringing you the latest as we keep receiving them. I thank you so much for watching. This has been Diaspora Dispatches. My name is Miriam Oguto. I'll see you here tomorrow, God willing. Bye-bye.
Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.